Welcome to the Madison Miller Podcast. Today is Thursday, January 16th, 2020. Today I'm going to recap yesterday's college basketball, NBA, and NHL games, look ahead to tonight's games in each of those sports, what we know and what I question for the Pac-12, the SEC, and a couple of randoms of my choice, NFL picks for the weekend, and my podcast plans for next week. Okay, we'll start with college basketball. Going to be very, very quick here. Just going to do scores and look ahead to tonight and the weekend. Because no podcast tomorrow, I'll discuss my plans for next week in a couple of minutes. So without further ado, here we go. Lafayette over Colgate, 71-67. St. Francis, Pennsylvania over Fairleigh Dickinson, 185. Sacred Heart over Central Con, 66-55. Number 18, Seton Hall over number 5, Butler, 78-70. South Carolina over number 10, Kentucky, 81-78. Syracuse over Boston College, 76-50. Number 9, Florida State over Virginia, 54-50. Georgetown over number 25, Creighton, 83-80. Georgia over Tennessee, 80-63. Duquesne over Fordham, 59-56 in overtime. George Washington over George Mason, 73-67. Vermont over Binghamton, 72-53. Maine over UMass Lowell, 104-98 in overtime. Albany over New Hampshire, 76-73 in overtime. American over Bucknell, 61-60. Navy over Lehigh, 88-83. NC State over Miami, 80-63. Hartford over Stony Brook, 68-65. Mercer over VMI, 73-62. Tulsa over East Carolina, 65-49. St. Bonaventure over UMass, 74-61. Fairfield over St. Peter's, 61-51. Rutgers over Indiana, 59-50. Merrimack over Bryant, 71-67. UNC Greensboro over Citadel, 79-69. East Tennessee State over Sanford, 88-63. Furman over Western Carolina, 83-79. Indiana State over Evansville, 65-42. Chattanooga over Wofford, 72-59. Long Island over St. Francis Brooklyn, 69-66. Incarnate Word loses at McNeese, 72-56. Rhode Island over St. Joe's, 71-61. Number 2, Baylor over Iowa State, 68-55. Northwestern State over Nicholls, 73-72. Southeast Louisiana over A&M Corpus Christi, 62-56. Bradley over Missouri State, 91-78. Northern Iowa over Valpo, 88-78. South Dakota State over North Dakota, 87-66. North Dakota State over South Dakota, 72-70. Sam Houston State over Lamar, 80-75 in overtime. New Orleans over Houston Baptist, 106-98. Marquette over Xavier, 85-65. Texas over Oklahoma State, 76-64. Stephen F. Foster over Central Arkansas, 77-76. Arkansas over Vandy, 75-55. Providence over St. John, 63-58. Notre Dame over Georgia Tech, 78-74. Alabama over number 4 Auburn, 83-64. Temple over number 16 Wichita State, 65-53. Minnesota over Penn State, 75-69. Houston over SMU, 71-62. Air Force over Boise, 85-78. Colorado State over New Mexico, 105-72. UTEP over UTSA, 80-77 in overtime. Stanford over UCLA, 74-59. UC Irvine over Cal State Fullerton, 71-64. And UNLV over San Jose State, 98-87. Two finals already today. NJIT over Lipscomb, 75-57. And Army over Holy Cross, 79-67. 6 o'clock ESPN Plus, Radford, South Carolina Upstate. High Point, UNC Asheville. 7 o'clock ESPN, Cincinnati at number 22, Memphis. Memphis is favored by 4. I'm laying it with Memphis. They're better than Cincinnati with or without James Weissman. Presbyterian over Longwood. Arkansas State, App State, Georgia Southern, Troy, Youngstown State, and Northern Kentucky. North Florida, Jacksonville, Stetson, North Alabama, Northeastern, Charleston, Elon Drexel, Marist, Monmouth, Cleveland State, Wright State, William & Mary, Delaware, Hofstra, UNC Wilmington, Charleston Southern, Campbell. On ESPNU, Campbell's a 7.5-point favorite at home. I'm laying it with Campbell. Winthrop and Hampton, UAB, Florida International, Middleton, FAU, Charlotte, Marshall, Kennesaw, Florida Gulf Coast, Quinnipiac, Manhattan, Little Rock, Coastal Carolina, Rice, La Tech, Old Dom, Western Kentucky, Southern Illinois, Loyola, Chicago, Oral Roberts, Western Illinois, North Texas, Southern Miss, Cal State, Bakersfield, UMKC, Grand Canyon, Chicago State, Detroit, Mercy, Milwaukee, Oakland, Green Bay, Illinois State, Drake, Texas State, UL Monroe, Texas, Arlington, Louisiana, Georgia State, South Alabama, Austin P, Southeast Missouri State at 8:15, 8:30 Pac-12 Network, Utah, Arizona. Arizona's favorite 13.5. I'm taking the dog in the points. Arizona will win. Jacksonville State and Eastern Illinois, Murray State, Tennessee Martin, Morehead State, Tennessee Tech, SIU, Edwardsville, number 8, Oregon at Washington, 9 o'clock Fox Sports 1. Oregon's a 9.5-point road favorite. I'm going to lay it with Oregon. Number 20, Colorado at Arizona State on ESPN2. Colorado's a 1-point road favorite. Give me the dog here. I just think that Bobby Hurley's team's going to be ready to go, and this is a revenge spot from earlier in the year. San Diego, BYU. BYU is a 15-point favorite. I think they cover that. Loyola Marymount, Pepperdine. Pepperdine's -7. I would take Marymount plus the 7. Northern Arizona, Southern Utah. Sacramento State, Northern Colorado. Eastern Kentucky, Belmont. Weber State, Idaho State. New Mexico State, Utah Valley. 10 o'clock, Texas, Rio Grande, Seattle. Pacific, Portland. Pacific's a 5-point favorite on the road. Give me Portland. I think they win that game outright. Cal State, Northridge, and UC Riverside, UC Davis, Long Beach State, Eastern Washington, Idaho, Cal, USC, Pac-12 Network, 10:30. USC is an 11-point favorite. Give me the home favorite. Santa Clara, number 1, Gonzaga. Gonzaga is -19.5. Give me Santa Clara to cover, but Gonzaga to win. Oregon State, Washington on Fox Sports 1. Washington's a 3.5-point home favorite. I think they cover that. Good bounce back spot there. And then Cal Poly at Hawaii. All right. Some of tomorrow's lines are out, so we'll go by tomorrow's lines. Dayton at St. Louis, 5 o'clock or 7 o'clock on ESPN2. Dayton's a 9-point favorite. I think St. Louis covers, but Dayton wins. Wisconsin at number 18, Michigan State, or 15. Michigan State's 7.5-point favorite. I'm taking Wisconsin in the points, but Michigan State will win. Siena, Canisius, Fairfield, Iona, Ryder, Niagara, Furman, Wofford on ESPNU. Furman's a 3-point road favorite. Give me Wofford to win outright. Brown, Yale at 7:30, 9 o'clock, Fox Sports 1. Number 19, Michigan and Iowa. Iowa's a 4-point home favorite. Revenge spot, they'll cover that. Bethesda and Cal Baptist. Saturday, I'm going to try to go through this very, 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 very quickly. I'll do my projected line and my pick after I say the game. For those certain ones, I'm going to do it with. 11:30, UMBC, New Hampshire. 12 o'clock, ESPN2. Number 2, Baylor, Oklahoma State. I'd make this Baylor by, that's tough, 10. And I'd lay it. Fox Sports 1, UConn at number 14, Villanova. I'd make that Villanova by 15.5. I'd take UConn plus that number. Number 18, Seton Hall, St. John's. 12 o'clock on Fox. I'd make it Seton Hall by 3, quote-unquote, on the road. But I think St. John's wins outright in a home upset. Number 21, Ohio State, Penn State, ESPNU. I'd make this Penn State by 2, and I think it's a revenge spot. They'd cover that. UIC, IUPUI. 12 o'clock ESPN, North Carolina at Pitt. I'd make this Pitt by 1, and I think Pitt would win and cover that. Syracuse, Virginia Tech. I'd make this Virginia Tech by 3 in a possible revenge spot for Syracuse because Vatek won at Syracuse a while ago. I think Virginia Tech wins here and covers that 3. LaSalle, Rhode Island, 12:30 NBCSN. I would make this Rhode Island by 3. I think they cover that. 1 o'clock, number 5, Butler, DePaul. I make this Butler by 5 on the road. Give me DePaul and the points. I think DePaul picks them off. Number 9, Florida State at Miami, ACC Network. I'd make this Florida State by 7. I think Miami would cover, but FSU wins. South Carolina and A&M, 1 o'clock on the SEC Network. I'd make this A&M by 3, and I think A&M would win and cover. Loyola Army, Miami of Ohio, Ball State. The Citadel, VMI, Oral Roberts, Purdue, Fort Wayne. Detroit Mercy, Green Bay. Cal State, Bakersfield, Chicago State, 1:30 CBS, number 4, Auburn at Florida. I'd make this line Florida by 2, and I would take Auburn to win outright in a bounce back spot. Number 6, Kansas at Texas. I would make this Kansas by 4.5, and I would take Shaka Smart's team in the points to win outright. Number 12, West Virginia at Kansas State. I'd make this WVU by 5.5 on the road, and I think they would cover that, the Mountaineers. ESPN2, Purdue at number 17, Maryland. I'd make this Maryland by 5, and I think they'd win and cover that. Buffalo, Central Michigan, Arkansas State, Coastal Carolina, Missouri State, Evansville, Boston University, Colgate, Ohio, Eastern Michigan, Toledo, and Akron. I'd make that Akron by 7.5, and I think Akron would win and cover. Dartmouth and Harvard, St. Joe's, Penn. I would make this Penn by 1, and I think they'd win and cover. James Madison, Towson, Longwood, Campbell, Charleston, Southern, High Point, Hampton, UNC, Asheville, Hartford, Vermont, William & Mary, Drexel, Elon, Delaware. 2 o'clock, CBS Sports Network, St. Bonaventure, and VCU. I'd make this VCU by 4, and I think VCU would win and cover that. TCU, Oklahoma. I'd make this Oklahoma by 4, and I think Oklahoma would win and cover. Fox Sports 1, Marquette and Georgetown. I'd make this Georgetown by 2.5, and I think they will go out and win again. So give me Georgetown minus that number. ESPN 3, Tulane hosts Tulsa. I would make this Tulane by 2.5, and I think they win and cover that. Clemson, NC State. I make this NC State by 10.5, based on what the line against Miami was, and Miami's better than Clemson, and I think that this is a letdown for Clemson, so I think NC State would blow the doors off of here. 2:30, number 20, Colorado, Arizona. I would make this line Arizona by 5, and I think that Colorado would cover that 5, but Arizona would win a close one. 2:30, NBCSN, Richmond and George Mason. I would make this George Mason by 2, but I like Richmond in the spot to win the game outright. 3 o'clock, you got Sacramento State, Southern Utah, Georgia State, Troy, Texas, Arlington, UL Monroe, Omaha, Denver, North Dakota State, Mercer, Sanford, Rice, Southern Miss. 3:30, SEC North, Missouri, and Alabama. I would make this Alabama by 5, but I'd say Missouri covers because I could see a letdown from Alabama. I don't know if they'll win the game, but I think that it'll be close. Number 8, Oregon against Washington, 3:45 CBS. I would make this Oregon by 7. I know that's a crazy number, but I just think that Washington is overvalued right now, and that's what I'd make it. But I think Washington would cover that number, but I'm going to say that Oregon wins the game. 4 o'clock ESPN, number 10, Kentucky against Arkansas. I'd make this Kentucky by 3 on the road, and I like Arkansas to win the game outright and show people that they're for real. Houston, Wichita State, 4 o'clock ESPN 2. I'd make this game Wichita State by 3.5, and I think they cover that easily. Good bounce back spot there. ESPN U, Iowa State at number 23, Texas Tech. I would make this Texas Tech by 9, and I think that Iowa State would cover that, although Tech would win. Pac-12 Network, Oregon State and Washington State. I would make this Oregon State by 1, and I think they'd win. Radford Presbyterian, Hofstra, Charleston, Holy Cross American, Kent State, Western Michigan, Northern Illinois, Bowling Green, Northern Arizona, Northern Colorado, Kennesaw State, NJIT, LIU, Bryant, Central Con, Mount St. Mary's, Merrimack, Robert Morris, St. Francis, Brooklyn, Wagner, Georgia Southern, South Alabama, Lafayette Navy, Loyola Marymount, San Francisco, Florida A&M, South Carolina State, Texas Rio Grande, Utah Valley, NC Central, Bethune-Cookman, NCAT, Coppin State, Howard, Morgan State, UTEP, UTSA, UAB, FAU, CBS Sports Network, St. Mary's, and Pepperdine. I'd make this St. Mary's by 6, and I think they'd cover that. Central Arkansas, Nichols, Colorado State Air Force. I would make this a pick'em, and I would pick Colorado State. 4:15 Tennessee Tech, Eastern Illinois. 4:30 Fox Sports 1. Providence against number 25 Creighton. I'd make this Creighton by 3, and I think they'd cover that in the bounce back spot. Jacksonville State, SIU, Edwardsville, Little Rock, Appalachian State, St. Peter's, Quinnipiac, South Carolina Upstate, Gardner-Webb, Florida Gulf Coast, North Alabama, George Washington, UMass on NBCSN. I'd make this UMass by 3, and I think they'd win and cover that. Lamar A&M, Corpus Christi, 5 o'clock, Big Ten, Northwestern against number 24 Illinois. Congrats to Illinois for being ranked. I make Illinois a 6.5-point home favorite, and I think they'd cover that. Morehead State, Belmont, Austin P, Tennessee Martin, Eastern Kentucky, Tennessee State, North Texas, Louisiana Tech, Charlotte, Western Kentucky, Murray State, Southeast Missouri State, Alcorn State, Mississippi Valley State, 5:30 Incarnate Word, then Stephen F. Austin, 6 o'clock ESPN, number 11 Louisville, number 3 Duke. This is probably where game day's headed. I'd make Duke a favorite here by 3 at home, and I'd take the Blue Devils to cover that. I just think that these two teams are even at the moment, and I'd take Duke. 6 o'clock, CBS Sports Network, New Mexico, UNLV. I would make New Mexico favored on the road by, let's go with 3, and I think in the bounce back spot, they'd cover that number. Alabama State, Alabama A&M, ESPN 2, Northern Iowa against Bradley. I'd make this UNI by 2.5, and I'd take Bradley to cover and win outright. Fresno State, Wyoming. I would make this Wyoming by 3, and they'd win and cover. SEC North, Tennessee, Vandy. I'd make this Tennessee by 2. I think they'd win and cover that. UC Davis, Cal State, Northridge, Eastern, Washington, Montana State. Sets in Jacksonville, South Florida. UCF. I would make this UCF by 4.5, and I think that they'd win and cover that. That was a nice performance the other day against Tulane. Stanford, USC, Pac-12 Network, 6:30. I'd make this USC by 4. I think they'd win and cover that. Prairie View, Grambling, Texas Southern, Jackson State, Maryland Eastern, Norfolk State, Youngstown State, Wright State, Old Dominion, Marshall, Chattanooga, Greensboro. I would make this, by the way, these two teams are combined 26 and 11. I'd make this Greensboro by 5. I think they'd cover that. Northeastern, UNC Wilmington, Oakland, Milwaukee, Middle Tennessee, FIU, East Tennessee State, Western Carolina. That's another good one in that conference. These two teams are combined 28 and 7. I'd make Western Carolina a 1-point home favorite, and I think they'd win and cover that. Lipscomb, Liberty, Big Ten Network, Indiana, Nebraska. I'd make Indiana a 8.5-point favorite. I'd take Nebraska to cover, but Indiana to win. Albany, Stony Brook, Monmouth, Manhattan, McNeese, New Orleans, Lehigh, Bucknell, Cornell, Columbia, Cleveland State, Northern Kentucky, Sacred Heart, St. Francis, Pennsylvania, Cal State, Fullerton, Long Beach State at 7:30, 8 o'clock, CBS Sports Network, Nevada, and San Diego State. I'd make San Diego State a 14.5-point home favorite, and I think they'd win and cover that. They've been so good this season. Southeast Louisiana, Abilene Christian, Sam Houston State, Houston Baptist, LSU, Ole Miss on ESPN2. I'd make this LSU by 3, and I think they'd win and cover that. ACC Network, Virginia, and Georgia Tech. I'd make Virginia a 6-point road favorite. I think they win and cover and bounce back. Temple and SMU. I'd make this SMU by 4. I think they'd win and cover that in the bounce back spot. Grand Canyon, UMKC, Southern Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Indiana, and Valparaiso. Texas State, Louisiana, Georgia, and Mississippi State. I'd make Mississippi State a 2.5-point home favorite. I think they'd win and cover that. Idaho, Montana, Pac-12 Network, 9 o'clock, Utah, Arizona State. I'd make Arizona State a 3-point home favorite. I think they'd win and cover that. Pacific, Santa Clara. That's a good game. Those two teams from the WCC are combined 29 and 8. I'd make Santa Clara a 5-point home favorite. I think that they'll win the game, but Pacific covers. ESPN2, 10 o'clock, BYU against number 1 Gonzaga. I'd make this Gonzaga by 13.5. I think Gonzaga would win and cover that. Utah State, Boise State. On ESPNU, I would make Utah State a 3-point road favorite. I think they'd win and cover that. New Mexico State and Seattle. San Diego, Portland. I'd make Portland a 1-point favorite, but I'd take San Diego in an upset. Idaho State, Portland State, UC Riverside, UC Irvine, and UC Santa Barbara, Hawaii. Sunday, 12 o'clock, CBS Sports Network, Davidson and Fordham. I'd make Davidson a 6-point road favorite, and I'm going to take Fordham plus the 6, but Davidson the win. Minnesota, Rutgers, 1 o'clock, Big Ten Network. I'd make Rutgers a 4-point home favorite. That's crazy. I think they'd cover that too. Siena, Niagara, 2 o'clock, Binghamton, Maine. Iona, Marist. Ryder, Canisius, 4 o'clock, Drake, Southern Illinois. ESPNU, Loyola, Chicago, Illinois State. I would make Loyola a 4-point road favorite. I think they get picked off. Illinois State wins outright. 4:30, South Dakota State, South Dakota. 6 o'clock, ESPNU, East Carolina, Cincinnati. I'd make Cincinnati a 6-point home favorite. I think they win and cover. They're starting to turn it around a little bit. ACC Network, Boston College, Wake Forest. I would make Wake a 2-point home favorite, but I'd take Boston College on the road to win the game outright. And ESPNU on Sunday night at 8 o'clock, Cal and UCLA. I'd make UCLA a 6-point home favorite, and I think they get a much-needed victory there. NBA. I'm going to go over the games from last night, just the results, and look ahead to tomorrow and the weekend. Tonight and the weekend. Pistons over the Celtics, 116-103. Sixers over the Nets, 117-106. Heat over the Spurs, 106-100. Raptors over the Thunder, 130-121. Bulls over the Wizards, 115-106. Pacers over the Timberwolves, 104-99. Nuggets over the Hornets, 186. Blazers over the Rockets, 117-107. Mavs over the Kings, 127-123. And Magic upset the Lakers, 119-118. Tonight, 7:30, Suns, Knicks. 8 o'clock, TNT, Celtics, Bucks. Milwaukee's giving 11. I'm going to take Boston plus the 11, but Milwaukee to win. Jazz, Pelicans, 10:30, TNT, Nuggets, Warriors. Nuggets are a 3.5-point road favorite. I think the Nuggets are going to kill them. That's the best bet in the NBA tonight, but I'm not doing best bets tonight. And the Magic at the Clippers, although the Clippers laying 11.5. Sans no Paul George. That's a stay away, even though the Magic are probably going to have a letdown. But the no Paul George thing scares me. Tomorrow, 7 o'clock, Wizards, Raptors, Timberwolves, Pacers. Bulls 76ers on ESPN. Philly's given 7.5. I'd lay it with Philly. That number's low. 8 o'clock, Heat, Thunder. Cavs, Grizzlies, 8:30 Hawks, Spurs, and 9:30 ESPN Trailblazers, Mavs in a pick'em. I am taking Dallas at home. I think that Dallas should be favored there at home. Saturday, 3:30 ABC, Clippers, Pelicans. I would make this line, assuming the 2 stars play, I'd make this Clippers by 7 on the road. I would take the Pelicans to cover because it's a national game, but the Clippers to win. Bucks, Nets, 7 o'clock Suns, Celtics, 7:30 Pistons, Hawks, 76ers, Knicks, 8 o'clock Raptors, Timberwolves, Cavs, Bulls, 8:30 Magic Warriors, ABC Primetime, Lakers, Rockets, Mike Breen, Jeff Van Gundy, Mark Jackson, Lisa Salters on the call. I'd make this Lakers by 1 on the road, assuming Anthony Davis comes back, and if there's no Anthony Davis, then I'd make this Rockets by 2. I think the Rockets are winning regardless, because this is a big spot for them and a must-win, must-show year-for-real spot. 9 o'clock Kings, Jazz, and Trailblazers, Thunder. Sunday, 2 games. Heat, Spurs, and Pacers, Nuggets. One's at 3, and the other is at 8. Now I'm going to go through the NHL scores from yesterday, look ahead to tonight and the weekend. Hawks over the Canadiens 4-1, Flyers over the Blues 4-3 in overtime on a goal by Jacob Voracek. About to get underway at 7 o'clock, Rangers, Islanders, Penguins, Bruins, Flames, Maple Leafs, Kings, Panthers, Canadiens, Flyers, Devils, Capitals, Hurricanes, Blue Jackets, 7:30, Golden Knights, Senators, 8 o'clock Ducks, Predators, NBCSN, 8 o'clock Lightning, Wild. I'm taking the Lightning there on the road. 8:30 Sabres, Stars, 9 o'clock Sharks, Avalanche, 10 o'clock Canucks host the Coyotes. Friday, 7:30 Penguins, Red Wings, Ducks, Hurricanes, 8 o'clock Lightning, Jets. Saturday, 1 o'clock Capitals, Islanders, 3 o'clock Blues, Avalanche, Coyotes, Oilers, 4 o'clock Flames, Senators, 7 o'clock Blackhawks, Maple Leafs, Golden Knights, Canadiens, Panthers, Red Wings, Kings, Flyers, Devils, Blue Jackets, 8 o'clock Sabres, Wild, 9 o'clock Sabres, Predators at 8, 9 Stars, Wild, 10 Sharks, Canucks. Sunday, 12:30 on the big NBC, Bruins, Penguins. I would take Pittsburgh, the win at home. 5 o'clock Islanders, Hurricanes, 7 o'clock Jets, Blackhawks, and the Blue Jackets at the Rangers. Now I'm going to do what we know and what I question regarding Pac-12, SEC, and a couple of my own. We're going to start the Pac-12. We're going to go in ABC order. Arizona, what we know is that they're in the midst of a nice bounce-back season. Predictable one as well, even though they have some weird losses. My question is, can they get a top 6 seed in the tournament? Arizona State, not up to standards of Bob Hurley. Question, can they conceivably sneak in the tournament with a couple more upset victories? Next up is Cal. They really haven't been all that special, although they've been a surprising conference place thus far. And my question for Cal is whether they could play or continue to play solid. Spoiler. Colorado, what we know is that this is the year that they're finally going to get into the big dance. And what I question is, how far can they go? Next up, we're going to go with Oregon. What we know is that this is the best team in the Pac-12, and even though they have a loss, I strongly feel that way. And my question is, can Peyton Pritchard compete for the National Player of the Year, let alone the Big 12 or the Pac-12 Player of the Year? Oregon State, what we know is that this is an improved team. My question is, can they actually make the big dance? Next up is Stanford. What we know is that this is the most improved team in the Pac-12, and what I question is, can they conceivably get a top 6 seed in the big dance? Next up, USC. What we know is that they're also in the midst of a nice bounce-back year. My question is, can they keep this up and make the tournament? UCLA, what we know is that this has been an absolute dumpster fire so far. And what I question is, can they eventually become a good spoiler down the stretch? Utah, what we know is that this team is just kind of hanging there on the bubble. And my question is, NIT or the big dance? Washington, what we know is that this season has been an utter disappointment. My question for them is, can Jalen McDaniels conceivably win the Freshman of the Year? Washington State. What we know is that this is an improved team from last year, and it looks like they made the right hire. And my question is, can they continue to play good spoiler in the conference? Next up, the SEC. We're going to go in ABC order. Again, Alabama, what we know is that this year kind of has been a disappointment in year one for Nate Oates. My question is, can they continue to play good spoiler like we saw last night? Next up is Arkansas. This is obviously the biggest surprise, not just in the SEC, but arguably in the entire sport. And my question is, can Eric Musselman keep this up and get his team not only into the tournament, but conceivably a top 6 seed? Auburn, sans all the losses from last year's team, this is one hell of a job here by Bruce Pearl. My question is, will those losses come back and haunt them in March? All right, next up, Florida. They have been a disappointment this year. That's what we know. And my question is, can they conceivably get back on track? It's looking like that thus far. Georgia, what we know is that Anthony Edwards is an absolute stud. And my question is, can he conceivably compete for the, not just the, he'll probably win the SEC Freshman of the Year, but how about the National Freshman of the Year? Next up is Kentucky. What we know is that this is a flawed Kentucky team, but it's still a very good Kentucky team. My question is, can this team conceivably win the national championship? Next up, I have Mississippi State. What we know is that SEC play has not gone off to the finest start yet. And what I question is, can they conceivably turn it around and perhaps steal a spot in the big dance? Missouri. What we know is that this is probably one of the 3 worst teams in the conference. And what I question is, can they continue to play some spoiler? Ole Miss. What we know is that this is a major step back from a surprising tournament appearance last year. And what I question is, can Kermit Davis get them up to play some spoiler while they're 0-3 in conference play so far? Next up is South Carolina. What we know is that this year has been a little bit challenging for Frank Martin's team. And what I question is Frank Martin's job secretly in jeopardy? I'm kind of curious about that because he's been there a while, been a couple years since they've been in the tournament. And the rest of the conference is getting better, and they're sort of getting worse. Tennessee. What we know is that this team has taken a step back from the last few years. And what I question is, can they conceivably turn this around and sneak into the big dance? Texas A&M. Despite a slow start, Buzz Williams looks like the right hire. My question is, how much spoiler can this team play? And last but not least, Vanderbilt. What we know is that this is easily the worst team in the SEC. And what I question is, how many SEC wins will this team get? All right, I'm going to have 5 randoms for you. Gonzaga. What we know is that this team continues to kick ass in conference play, and this team just impresses year after year after year. My question is this finally the year where Mark Few can win a national championship? San Diego State. What we know is that they're undefeated. They're the last undefeated team in the country. And what I question is, can they conceivably get a 1 seed if things were to break right and say they remain undefeated or have 1 or 2 losses come Selection Sunday? Another team is Liberty. What we know is that this is the best mid-major team that isn't talked about enough. And what I question is, can this conceivably be a team that gets an at-large? Another team that I'm going to put on this list is Dayton, the Flyers. What we know is that Obi Toppin is an absolute stud. And my question is, can Dayton conceivably get a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. And my last pick for the randoms for this will be St. Mary's. And what we know about St. Mary's is that they continue to have the defensive identity and continue to play smart and hard under Randy Gregory. And what I question, or Randy Bennett, my bad. And what I question with St. Mary's is can they avoid being left out of the tournament? There's been a lot of times this team's been left out of the tournament because of weak resumes or whatnot, and other years where they have snuck in as an at-large team like they did last year, although I think they won the conference tournament last year, and they were still on the at-large line, which is kind of bizarre. NFL picks for the AFC and NFC championship games. These lines are brought to you by DraftKings. We will start with the AFC. The Chiefs are hosting the Titans. The Chiefs are giving 7.5. The over-under is 52.5. The Titans are coming off a great upset road win in the divisional round over Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. The Chiefs are coming off a fantastic come-from-behind, then blowout divisional round home win over the Houston Texans. So now the Chiefs get to see an AFC South team for the second consecutive week at home. This is right around, actually no, this is a shorter line than the Texans game. So Vegas believes that the Titans are better than the Texans. This is tough. I think that the Chiefs offense is just absolutely humming right now after what was a shaky start against the Texans. The Titans defense has really thrived, but they're running into a buzzsaw here. Although I thought they were running into a buzzsaw last week and I was proven wrong. But I just think that Andy Reid's going to keep showing them tape of that Ravens game, and they're going to do some different things. Although I think the Titan defense will do better than the Texans defense on their offense, but I still think that the Kansas City Chiefs will win the game. I'm going to take the Titans plus the 7.5, but I'm going to say the Chiefs win the game 30-24 in what should be a fun game. Won't be surprised if it goes to overtime, and then the Chiefs, unlike last year, get the overtime touchdown to go to the Super Bowl for the first time in, I believe, franchise history that they're going to go to the Super Bowl. If not in franchise history, but maybe it's the second. And on the other side, in the NFC, you have the Green Bay Packers against the San Francisco 49ers. San Francisco is also laying 7.5. The over-under is 46.5. Green Bay's coming off a divisional round home win over the Seattle Seahawks in a game where Seattle nearly came back and beat them. San Francisco is coming off a dominant divisional round home win over the Minnesota Vikings. Green Bay and Minnesota, in my mind, are very similar teams. Minnesota figured out a way to upset one of the Dragons in the NFC and the Saints. The Packers survived against the Seattle team that I think is fraud. Green Bay, meanwhile, I feel is a little fraudulent. I think they might show its warts here. I don't think that the run game will be as successful as it was last week because the Niners' pass rush is much better than Seattle's. And I think that the Niners are going to win this game by double digits and go to the Super Bowl for the first time in, I believe, 7 years. So give me San Francisco to win this game 27-17 to go to the Super Bowl to set up a great matchup with the Chiefs in what is the Alex Smith Bowl, even though Alex Smith isn't on either of those teams anymore. So that's kind of ironic there in terms of the Niners-Chiefs Super Bowl. Before I go, I'm going to discuss my plans for the podcast for next week. So no podcast tomorrow. I'll be traveling. And I'll have 3 podcasts next week. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Monday's podcast, we're going to review everything from the weekend. Look ahead to everything on Monday and Tuesday. We'll pick the Super Bowl line. Wednesday, we'll go over everything from Monday and Tuesday and pick everything for Wednesday and Thursday. And I may or may not have an activity in store. Friday, we'll go over everything from Wednesday and Thursday and pick everything for next Friday and next weekend. And then I'm going to do my predictions for the Grammys on Friday's show, because that's going to be our last show before the Grammys on January 26th. So there you have it, my last podcast until Monday. And I hope you guys have a great weekend, everybody. And the other thing is that no best bets until the following week. So that's another announcement I have. So yet again, have a very, very awesome weekend, you guys.